and welcome back to my channel True Crime and Trials, where I discuss true crime and trials. My name's Lindsay, and the next video is the next witnesses in the Bob Durst trial, and next up is Stephen Greenhouse. Now this is a quick one, and he worked for the New York Times since 1983, and he also worked as a law clerk. And as you remember from the last witness, Miriam Barnes, he was friends with her, and they weren't close friends, but they were, just friends. They would keep in touch. Stephen knows who Bob is because he received a phone call from Miriam one night. He also knew about the Durst family due to his work in New York at the New York Times. So on the phone call, Miriam said, "Stephen, a crazy sad thing happened. My friend Susan Berman was murdered, and she was a close friend." And she said she wanted advice from him because of what Susan had told her. And she said if she went to law enforcement, the same thing might happen to her. So she didn't know what to do. Stephen said it's not worth it if you're scared. So after the jinx aired, Stephen told Miriam that she might want to talk to Charlie Bagley, a reporter he worked with. So that's just, connecting that up with Miriam's testimony. So next up we have Stephen Silverman. Now, in this testimony, you'll hear a different side to Susan, because this is a friend of hers that really didn't think she was that great. To the point that he actually moved away and into an apartment building that was high up so she wouldn't even come near him. So he knows Susan from when he was an editor in LA, and one day out of the blue, Susan came into his office and introduced herself, and she wanted to write for his magazine. The next time he saw her was the National Book Convention in San Francisco, and Susan was there, and he thinks he told her he was thinking of moving to New York. And Stephen says that the following year or months later, Susan called him and said there was an apartment next to hers in New York and she wanted him to take it, which he did. And this was in 1977. Yeah, I was born. So during this time, he got to know her very well, and they became very close friends. He would describe her as abrasive, and he says she loved attention and was a very high maintenance, to the point he only kept the apartment for a year and a half. But despite all that, she was loyal. I mean, everybody said she was loyal, but, we know this is put down to her mob background. Stephen confirms that there was absolutely no way would she open her door to a stranger. She had 3 locks on her door and wouldn't even answer the buzzer. He says that Susan was extremely manipulative, because one way or another she would get what she wanted and would never take no for an answer. And we've heard this before from other witnesses. And of course, he knew Bob, and he says he was generally very pleasant. And he also met Kathy, who also, he says, was a very pleasant person. I don't think he spent enough time around anybody, around Bob to see him in action. He read about Kathy's disappearance reading the New York Post. He never talked to Susan about Kathy's disappearance, and he never asked her. He agrees that with Mr. Lewin that Susan could manipulate people for money, and he knows this because she tried it with him. So according to Stephen, Susan was a hypochondriac, and he knows this because one morning she was sick and she didn't have a doctor, so he took her to his, and then she proceeded to tell him a blow-by-blow account of her impacted bowels. He says if Susan had an upset stomach, you heard about it in exact detail, and she didn't hold back. So after that bit of testimony, Mr. Lewin asked him if he heard about the phone call to the dean. And he says when he heard what had been said, he thought that sounds exactly like Susan. So Susan sounds like a very sneaky and manipulative person, and if she had anything on you, she would use it. There was one time when Stephen told her that his mum was in the city. She was very ill, and Susan called his mum and got the whole family history, and Susan made it clear to him that she knew about his family. Wow. He found out that Susan had been murdered when he saw it online, and when he saw it, he got a knot in his stomach, but at the time he didn't make any connection to Bob. Stephen also says that if you wanted anything important kept a secret, then Susan wouldn't be the person to tell. Honestly, I don't think Stephen really liked Susan very much, and like I said, you know, she had a phobia of heights, so after a year and a half of living near her in New York, he moved far enough away and high up enough that she wouldn't even come visit him. So there we go. The next witness is Danny Goldberg. He met Susan in New York City when she was a journalist and he was a PR person, and they became friends and stayed in touch until she died. He says they briefly dated in the late 70s, and when asked to describe Susan's personality, he says she was very smart, funny and intense. He says she was tightly wound but a good friend. He knew Bob was Susan's close friend, and she would tell him that he was like a brother to her. He met Kathy once or twice. When he met Bob, he was friendly and managed to have a good conversation with him. He's pretty sure he heard about Kathy's disappearance through Susan. He remembers Susan telling him that it was a big deal and that she was talking to Bob a lot about it and consoling him. His opinion about Susan at the time was that she was Bob's media spokesperson. Susan also told him that she was there to help Bob deal with his grief and his accusations. Close to when Susan was murdered, Danny discussed Kathy's disappearance with Susan, and she told him that Bob was worried that Kathy's disappearance would be reopened, and that up until that point there hadn't been any convictions without a body, but since then there was, so Bob was getting really worried. And Danny also said in an interview he had with Mr. Lewin that Susan told him that she thought Bob probably killed her. And Danny thought that Susan knew more than she was telling him. So, do you feel like, you know, things are falling into place right now? I do. You know, not every one of these friends of Susan's can be lying. I mean, she's pretty much told a few of them the same thing. But she does have a tendency to be dramatic, and she has been known to lie, so it's a tough one. But there is motive there for Bob to kill her, so far that's what I'm thinking. Let me know what you think. Anyway, so I'll be back with more witnesses in the next video. So until then, bye for now.